Welcome to EPG Patishala. My name is Vidya-mitra. I am on the teaching faculty of the Department of Linguistics at Osmania University, Hyderabad. The course I have developed is Psychoneurolinguistics. Today I will be giving you a lecture on constructing sentences, which is module number 11. The two main points that I would like to discuss in today's lecture is what are the different processes involved in producing sentences. I will mention one or two models. Of course, they are based on English, but attempts are being done to check these models with other data from other languages. The second point is about the cognitive linguistic factors which guide us in producing a sentence. We have an idea in our head. How do those ideas become sentences when we speak? That's what I will try and explain in this lecture. On the screen you will see a blue fish moving towards a red fish, and it swallows it and goes away. You see that picture? It's actually taken from something called fish film. So you at the bottom you can see 0 seconds, 1 second, 2.75 seconds, 3.5 seconds. So as the time is elapsing, the blue fish moves towards the red fish, eats it and goes away. Now if you are asked to say, tell me what's happening in that film, since I am a Telugu speaker, let me try and make the sentence in Telugu. Oka neelam rangu chapa నెమ్మదిగా ఎర్రచాప వైపు ఈదుతూ వెళ్ళి దాని మింగేసింది. Someone else might say గబుక్కుని మింగేసింది. Someone else might say మింగి వెళ్ళిపోయింది. Alright, that is either గబుక్కున is suddenly, మింగి వెళ్ళిపోయింది is swallowed and went away. Okay, slight variation. This is how we produce sentences in Telugu. Now I took this film and showed it to a Hindi speaker and said, please make a sentence for me. And that person said, नीली मछली लाल मछली की तरफ बढ़ी और उसको खा गई. Very similar to Telugu description at one level, including the verb form खा गई, ate it up, like the Telugu form mingesindi. See, notice mingu is swallow. So why didn't I say mingindi? You can say mingindi, but I said mingesindi. Similarly, Hindi speaker said kha gai, right? So it's almost as if we want you to know that I have observed that the act of swallowing is over. Completion of the act of swallowing, I decided to bring it into my speech production, my sentence production, right? So what are some of the questions we should think about when we are talking about how do we produce sentences? What are the processes involved in making this transition from mental planning? We looked at the film, we created an image in our mind, finally it came out like this, right? So what happened between that mental picture and the actual words which came out of our mouths? What constraints are posed by our native language on our ability to articulate? Technically they say lexicalize our mental picture. Our mental picture is coming out as words. What is the role of our native language in that? Or is there no role? Will a language with a different word order or even focus on the red fish instead of the blue fish, will it make a difference? We need to think about many questions about sentence production. Let's look at a couple more questions. Why do speakers lexicalize differently in different languages? What aspect of language get communicated through gestures? We have not discussed, there is a separate module on little bit about gestures. The discussion is there. Maybe you should read that before you come to this module. But basically, when I am watching the fish film, I can move my hands and say mingesindi. I can make a gesture. Why do we do that? What is the relation of that gesture to our mental picture? Our general cognitive factors like memory and attention influence the way we generate a particular sentence? What developmental changes take place in our ability to describe events? The 5-year-old child and a 15-year-old boy, will they describe the same picture the same way? Is there a developmental trend in describing events? Are those processes somewhat different when we learn a second language? Okay, I am a native speaker of Telugu, but I went on to learn Kannada. If suppose I am asked to produce a sentence in Kannada, what happens? When you learn a second language, third language, what happens to our ability to transform our mental picture into sentences? These are some of the questions in psycholinguistics about sentence production. Much research on sentence production, the kind of work that took place to generate models of sentence production, which you will see in a few minutes, is based on, in the 50s and 60s especially, speech errors, slips of the tongue, spoonerisms. Okay, all of us make. We might bite our tongue and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake, and we correct ourselves. Slips of the tongue happen. They're very, very common. Tip of the tongue. Okay, somebody asks you, you know that actor, that movie we saw yesterday, what's his name? Then you say, oh God, it's coming to my, it's there, I know it starts with sir, but I can't get it. I'll get it, just give me some more time. So it's on the tip of my tongue, tip of the tongue phenomena. Tongue twisters, right? See, I don't think I dare say it now because I'm not very good at making tongue twisters, but a sentence full of sirs or shurs or whatever it is, as children we play these games with tongue twisters, hesitation pauses, language games. I as a child, I remember we used to have something called ka bhasha. You insert ka after in the middle of after every syllable you put ka so that your parents don't understand you or whatever it is. Children play games with this thing. These are all performance related behaviors that one observes. But the point is, much of this research exists today based on English. In Indian languages, we don't have as much work, and I really hope that after going through these modules and reading about the psycholinguistic codes, that you will collect more data based on English languages. But these are the kind of data they collected to come up with theories of sentence production. And in theorizing, making these theories, they said that distinction must be made between what are known as lemmas and lexemes. That is, they said we basically choose in wanting to produce a sentence, we first choose an abstract concept from our mental lexicon, content words, so semantic level in a particular grammatical category or whatever. They are very abstract and content based. They are called lemmas. We then transform lemma into actual word form, that is lexeme. So when we are able to access lemma but we can't get the lexeme, that is what is tip of the tongue phenomena. We keep saying, oh, I know, I'm not getting it. So you have accessed the lemma, but you are not able to get the lexeme, actual sounds in that word, right? So we all experience it. There's any amount of data on this. So researchers, by collecting data on speech errors, and in case you wonder how does one collect data on speech errors, it's not at all simple. You have to literally take a pencil and a notebook and keep following people in restaurants where, whenever somebody utters a speech error, you note down like that. Of course, in recent years, they have also found ways of inducing speech errors, but speech error, research on speech errors is very laborious, but there are lots of online corpora of speech errors for English. You might want to look at them. So anyway, based on the speech error data, one of the earliest models that was developed was by Garrett, and in this model, to your right is the mental lexicon, and then Garrett basically says before we can produce a sentence, distinction must be made between grammatical encoding and phonological encoding. Remember, phonology has to do with sounds. Grammatical encoding is at a higher level, and then phonological encoding. Grammatical encoding involves functional planning and positional planning. All right. So in other words, the kind of speech errors that one makes, whether you substitute one noun with another noun, one verb with another verb, you have errors like that also, or you misplace one sound with another sound in your speech error. Because errors occur at those different levels, or you hold on to the stress, but you make the particular linguistic unit travel somewhere else. Okay, you go to the e-text and look at the examples of speech errors I have given. It will become clearer to you. But the point I am stressing here is that the kind of speech errors they have noted made Garrett feel that a distinction must be made between two levels before the actual words come out. Mentally, we make grammatical planning and then arrange the syllables one next to each other and then produce the speech. So, again let me repeat salient features of Garrett's model. There is something called macro planning. So, we know what we want to speak about, what we intend to say, and then we go through functional level involving assigning function to words, the constituents retrieved from the lexicon, and then we go through a positional level where we attach, we put stress and certain phonological features, and at the phonological encoding stage we link lemmas and lexemes together to form the actual words. Alright. So, this is the functional level, positional level. You have the conceptualization, functional level, positional level, articulation. So, even this picture is given in the e-text, you see Garrett's model. But in 90s, Bach and Levelt modified this model somewhat, retaining the middle levels. So, Bach and Levelt model you see in the picture shown on the screen, you start with the message which you want to talk about, that is the topmost, it is conceptualization. Then you come to functional level, borrowed from Garrett, he keeps it. At functional level what happens is lexical selection. We choose the words, we give the function, grammatical function at that level, up to that level. When we move into positional level, from functional to positional level, we go through constituent assembly, attach inflections, morphological, okay, inflection, and then we come into phonological encoding lower level, where syllables are all aligned properly one next to each other, all that, and then finally the output comes out. So, the functional and the positional level together, Bach and Levelt called it grammatical encoding. So, you have a pre-verbal conceptual level, grammatical encoding, phonological, and then the speech comes out. So, the speech production models we have discussed together, basically they are trying to say there are three main processes happening. At the highest level is that macro planning, where we plan the message, the reference, what are we talking about, the information structure. These are all high level processes. At the next level, you have the grammatical encoding and phonological encoding, which deal with what are the units at this level, second level, phrases, words, morphemes, phonemes, metrical structure, like that. This is, now I am combining grammatical and phonological coding together to emphasize the units that we deal with at the second level. Finally, once we go through the second level, we come down to the third level, which is about articulation buffer. Here we plan the phonological phrases. What is a phonological phrase? See, when we say send it to me is actually phonologically, you do not have to break it. The individual meanings of send it to me is irrelevant. Send it to me is like phonologically it is one unit and we get the meaning together. So, that happens at the lower level. So, these are the three main stages, and put another way, look at the next picture. Level 99 version of the speech production model, it says, okay, again he is also saying conceptualization is the highest topmost level where we have the message generation. This is influenced by our situational and general knowledge, alright. all before we can produce a sentence or talk about anything, we have some knowledge about that. Right? That general knowledge and situational knowledge. We also know how to pitch our lecture, for instance. We take into consideration the audience, what they know about, what language, can I use two languages, can I mix two languages or should I not mix. This kind of information influences our conceptualization, the highest level of message planning. Then formulation. That is the grammatical and phonological encoding, the second stage that you saw in the previous picture. He calls it formulation. That is, it is formulating, before that they are not verbal, they are not linguistic, they are pre-verbal kind of a concepts. Now we are formulating them into linguistic level. So here the grammar and the lexicon of our language influence our formulation stage of production. The last third stage of articulation is influenced by speech motor control. Our muscles, how well our muscles are functioning, that will determine how precisely we articulate our speech, how clearly our consonants are articulated. So how do we know that this is a level that speech motor commands do influence the way we utter our sentences or whatever? You can do electromyographic studies. Okay, so speech physiology deals with all that. We can attach electrodes and see when we are making a round movement with our lips, whether the orbicularis oris, the muscle, whether there is more actions generated, electrical activity generated in that muscle. We can monitor at that level. So speech motor control influences the articulation level. Our grammar and lexicon influences the middle level of planning, and our discourse level, world knowledge influences the way we plan what we want to produce. So this is the models of speech production. So again, to repeat, levels model: conceptualization, formulation and articulation. These are the three main levels that which go along with even the previous models. It's not that level is contradicting anything that was said earlier. He is using slightly different language to explain the processes involved in producing. So that is the main topic I said first thing in my lecture. But can we say it is quite convincing, because researcher after researcher have said that speech production involves message planning and then grammatical and phonological encoding and articulation. Nobody is contradicting this. So can we say that these processes are universal? That irrespective of where we live, what language we speak, this is how speech production is working? Initially they tried saying that yes, these are universal. At that time, psycholinguistic research in the initial years, say up until 80s, was lot of research was done only on English and Dutch. Now English, Dutch and maybe German, those languages, based on that they thought these processes are all universal. But the moment psycholinguistic research moved into non-Germanic languages, say Japanese and Spanish, these things didn't work. The processes that they have explained, which seem very convincing, are not quite universal. Basically researchers started realizing that we need to go beyond just language, that code centricity, that is looking at only symbolic knowledge, which is arbitrary. What is language? Arbitrary symbols. But in trying to understand how speech production works, we need to look at other factors. So what are some of these factors? Accessibility, subject-verb agreement, sentence complexity. I am talking about linguistic factors, but there are also other things which influence. So let's pay some attention to these factors. There is visual factors, visual or semantic saliency, prototypicality, animacy. We have talked about animacy earlier. So these are some of the non-linguistic as well as semantic level factors which influence whether we are able to bring the listener's attention to the referent about which we are speaking. We are talking about speech production. I am going to speak to you about something. I am going to speak about, give me that bottle or whatever it is. The referent is the bottle. How well I am able to bring your attention to the referent which I have in my mind. That accessibility depends on many factors. Also, subject-verb agreement in a given language, complexity of the constituents, whether the way I planned it, whether it requires a simple sentence or a complex sentence with lots of clauses and things like that. So, what are the implications of bringing in this questioning universality and bringing language specificity? The models we have looked at basically are top down or unidirectional. I said we conceptualize, then grammar and lexicon help us in the middle stage, then speech motor commands make us finally open our mouth and we produce. So here we are trying to say that it's unidirectional feed forward. Information is coming from top to bottom. Okay. So if that is really true, in speech production is actually from top to bottom, then phonological encoding, which is, remember in all the figures, phonological encoding is at the bottom, right? It should not affect grammatical encoding. Phonological encoding in the pictures you have seen it lying below the grammatical encoding. So if something happens at phonological encoding, it should not affect the top level, right? Is that true? But that's what they thought. The modular models proposed earlier thought that something that happens at a lower level cannot affect at a higher level, all right? But a whole lot of cross-linguistic research that took place since late 80s and 90s, they have shown that phonological properties of nouns do affect gender-marked morphemes in Italian but not in Dutch. So Dutch speakers are found to be slower in producing noun phrases to refer to an object in the presence of a written word of different gender. Such gender manipulations did not affect the performance of Italian speakers. You will have to consult the e-text to get more details about some of these points that I am making here. The grammatical gender, see again, I do also have as a native speaker of Telugu, having lived only in South India, I do have a lot of problems with the way gender works in Hindi. I make mistakes when I speak Hindi. I make mistakes in assigning gender to nouns because we don't have to do that in our languages. So it's that kind of a thing I'm talking about. Assigning gender is at a higher level. But in psycholinguistic experiments, at the phonological level, mistakes do influence gender assignment, which is at a higher level. Further, grammatical gender reportedly affects production of noun phrases, but not if you have to produce only nouns. What is noun phrase is a syntactically higher category, right? So the cross-linguistic research is basically saying there is a lot of interaction. It is not top-down and unilateral or single direction. Speech production process is not coming from mind to lips. Information flow is only in that direction. There is a lot of interactivity is taking place, and that interactivity is influenced by the native language in which you are speaking. Then the recent research is also saying attention influences production, speech production. How? The attentional system in the brain, it's part of the cognitive system, filters visual information by selecting most salient information. It is only selectively attended information that gets encoded. Meaning you will only speak, there is a scene in front of you, rich scene, lots of things are happening in that scene, but you will pay attention to, your native language makes you pay attention to certain aspects of that scene and you will speak about only that scene. In fact, they have shown, research has shown that Chinese and Japanese speakers pay attention, much more attention to the background. English speakers pay attention to the foreground, objects in the scene, whereas Chinese and Japanese people pay attention to what is happening in the entire scene or something like that. In other words, our native language predisposes us to looking at the same scene differently, and therefore you will speak differently. So how do we investigate the influence of attention in language? I have mentioned to you in the other module visual world paradigm using eye tracking. It's an excellent methodology to investigate what role attention plays in producing a sentence. There is a notion called referential priming paradigm. Priming is like you tell the person, you give a prime first and then see its influence on the target that you want them to produce. Suppose I show you a scene. Look at the picture on the screen. Here, a policeman on the left side is punching the boxer who looks like a thief. If you want to think of him as a thief, that's fine. Policeman is punching the boxer. So if I show it to a native speaker of English, they'll say the policeman is punching a boxer. But if I draw one red arrow or something to the boxer, I draw their attention, visual attention to the boxer, they might start the sentence in a different way. They will not say the policeman. They might say the boxer is being punched or I don't know, whatever. Whatever they utter, if you draw their attention to one referent, they will speak from that referent. Right? The boxer is being punched by the policeman. Whichever referent was attended to, that will become sentence initial. They have shown that at least with English language. But more recent research used different versions of this paradigm, and they stated that referent in focus need not become subject, but it is the first mentioned constituent, but it may not be the subject. The focused referent is processed ahead of the rest of the information. When your attention is focused to a particular referent, that meaning is grabbed by the brain faster, and it is passed on to the lemma level earlier than the information belonging to non-focused referent. So in a scene, whatever you are focusing, that gets processed faster and the other thing takes a little later. Primed referent, what I mean by prime is that putting a red arrow saying that speak from here, this is important. Primed reference might also influence assignment of the remaining sentences frame. The moment you decide you are going to pay more attention to this referent, you will frame your sentence differently. You might make it passive if your language allows. Again, I repeat, please consult the e-text for details of this idea, how it works in Russian, Finnish and English. Some examples I have given there. But for now, I think I will just summarize what I have been saying. Most psycholinguistic models of speech production were based on data from speech errors, that is slips of the tongue, tongue twisters, tip of the tongue phenomena, language games, all this. They basically said that there is a macro planning stage of conceptualization which is very high. We engage from macro planning of conceptualization, we move on into slightly more micro planning of grammatical and phonological encoding, and then we articulate that sentence. The nature of that flow of information from conceptualization to articulation, initially they thought it was unidirectional, top down. We conceptualize, go through grammatical and phonological encoding and we articulate. But later, more computational models of sentence production, also more cross-linguistic data reveal that flow of information is not unidirectional. There is a lot of interaction takes place at different levels. The lower level can influence the higher level, and that a whole lot of linguistic factors like word order, agreement, animacy and cognitive factors like attention can influence the way we plan and articulate sentences. That's it. Thank you. And I hope you have understood the main points.